Hello everyone, I want to welcome you. My name is Megan Van Wart and I'm so glad that you're here with us today. Today we're going to be painting a beautiful fall and winter owl. Today's class is really going to be playful with different simplistic brush strokes. Really more is less in today's class. So I'll go through our supplies and then we'll go ahead and get started. So you'll need something to paint on today, whether you have a canvas panel, or you're painting on acrylic paper. You can choose whatever you'd like to paint on today. You'll also need an array of brushes. I have 3 brushes that I selected for today's class. I kind of have a medium half-inch brush. I have a medium, I have like a long round tip brush, and I have a detailed brush. You just want something that's, large, medium, and small for the fine detail, but also for some larger coverage areas as you wish. So you can make some of the choices there on what you choose. But grab any brushes that you have that you would like to use for today's class. In addition to the brushes, you'll also need a small plate to mix colors on. You'll need an array of paint colors. And if we look at our inspiration today, it's a lot of reds and oranges and yellows and brown and white and black. So if you have primary colors kind of coming into this class, blue, red, and yellow, black and white, I can teach you how to blend any colors from there, okay? So just know that, take it with a grain of salt. I'll teach you how to blend, make a light color lighter and darker as we go through, so no problem there. So you'll also need a paper towel for any messes. It's very helpful to have on hand. And then for today's class, I'm going to do a little bit of sketching with a pencil initially, so we can kind of get our composition in and then paint from there. And that is it. All right, so what we'll do to get started is we will go ahead and use our pencil to draw the composition. Now I'm going to try to get this nice and close so as I sketch you can see what I'm doing. There we go. So if you can see my overall canvas right now, top to bottom, my bottom's down here, but that's okay. We're really putting in a branch just below halfway for our owl to sit on. And then we'll be doing an outline of the owl, so you can really center the owl. You can figure out how big you want your owl to be, okay? Now for me, if I find halfway, which is right about here, I go just below, and I'm going to do a little bit of a natural branch. It's going to go down a little bit, so you can see my pencil line there. And you can figure out how thick or how thin you want this branch to be. And my branch is going to Y, so I'm going to have a branch that's going to be here, but I'm also going to have a lower branch that's going to come down and off. So I have a split branch. You can make your branch more thin than mine. Mine actually, I might make it a little bit more thin. This is why you use a pencil. You can make some changes. But take a moment to get a branch in place. And our bird is going to sit on top of this. So it also doesn't need to be this straight. It can kind of come down a little bit. So try to make your branch a little natural in shape, which means it's not perfectly straight. Maybe the edges are not perfectly even. You can play with it. And for me, I'm playing with the angle a little bit. So maybe this branch will come down. But I want you to be happy with your branch. And for me, I might want my branch just to come up a little higher. So for me, I'm just playing with the angle and the width of my branch. And this is why we take the time to do this in our work here. This is also a little too high for me. I might bring this down a little lower. Like the branches for me, I want it to be angling down a little bit. Maybe because of the weight of my bird, who knows? It's always fun just to slow down, to play with the composition and these details. And you can go with like a nice light pencil. If you see any pencil, you know, as you start painting, you can always erase some of the pencil just to give like a little bit lighter of a line. You can do like a soft erase, okay? I might come down a little lower with this branch down here. So it's okay to make changes. I always love making drastic changes, especially when we're sketching, just to show you it's okay to make a change. So I made that a little lower. So for me, I like that a little bit more. Okay. So take a few minutes to refine that, and then we'll center our owl. And we'll put our owl on next. Now in the background of this picture, there is a lot of light branch work, which we will do at the very end. Because it will allow us to get our owl in place and hold space for that owl. Our owl is going to be sitting on this branch, but it's going to appear behind the branch. So it's going to be sitting on top, but its back tail is going to be behind the bottom of this branch, which will be really fun. Okay. So next we'll do our owl. And if you need more time for your branch, feel free. But the body of the owl, I want you to find its head, and I want you to find its tail. And I want you to figure out how big or how small you might want it to be. And then the position of the owl. Do you want it to be on the right side? Do you want it to be on the left? So for me, I'm going to put it right here in the middle. And the top of my owl is going to be right up here. I'm going to leave about 3 inches, and I'm just going to do a small dot or a rounded mark for the top of the owl head. And I'm going to come straight down, and I'm going to find where I want the tip of the owl feathers to be. And I just did like a little V, a little smiley face down here. A little bit of a V to say, this is how big my owl's going to be. Okay? So we're doing a little bit of placement. Okay? So next, now that we have our owl head to bottom, centered or placed on our branch, we're going to do the height of the head. So the height of the head is roughly 1/3 of the entire owl. It could be a little shorter. So for me, I'm just going to find, well, where would I want its chin to be? Where do I want its head to be? And I might want it a little smaller than that. So you can always make an adjustment. You can even do a little bit of a rounded head. The left side of the head is a little bit more flat. Then the right side is going to be a little bit more rounded, and it's going to be because of the angle. So you can play with the head a little bit. The left side is going to kind of come straight down and then just curve. And then this side can be more rounded. You can play with the side of the head too. But just draw a head of your owl. The reason that the left side is straight is because he's going to be looking this way. We'll do some eye placements and nose placements, like its face is actually pointed to this direction. So I can always play with these lines, but it's good to kind of get a basic shape in for the head. And just know you can always change that. And then you can start to play with the bird's body. I'm going to want you to do really light sketching here. So you can really come from right at the side of the right side of the head here. You don't have to come out and rounded, but come kind of out and just come straight down. And then you're going to start to tailor the body inward. Like this is the bird's shoulder. So if you need to come out a little bit more to make it look a little bigger, you can. You can play with the angle of the line, right? You can see that. My head is a little big. I'm going to make it a little smaller. The head is pretty small compared to the body. There, that's a little bit better. And a lot of the brush strokes will help with some of this. But we're going to just play with the body's shape a little bit here. Okay, my bird is leaning a little bit. You can see I have a big ankle right here. That doesn't work well. Kind of want it to come out a little bit and then straight down. Line is a little too much up here, so you can play with some of the details. That's why a pencil is handy for today's class, so you can kind of make some modifications along the way. And you can see my owl. It's pretty small actually, so if I did want to make it a little bit bigger, guess what? I can just stretch these lines out a little bit. I can always make my head a little bit bigger. So I'm just kind of making some extra lines. You can play with how big or small you might want this body to be. But these are the tail feathers down here. So you can see I'm just doing some basic. Maybe I want to make the body a little bit bigger so I can raise the headline up a little bit. You can see how my head is getting a little smaller. For me, I like that. You can make the body a little wider. It's starting to look like a bird now, right? Maybe it's a little rounded on the top of the head. Again, if you wanted to make the bird bigger, you can. You can make all these lines just a little bigger, right? It's okay to kind of shift your lines. And again, I love being the guinea pig to kind of show you what it's like to have, I had a smaller bird and I just extended the lines out a little bit. And I like those bigger lines, those wider lines better. So I'm just coming in and erasing. So go ahead and adjust those lines, get your bird in, get the shape in as you see fit here. And these are just rough lines because we're going to be doing a lot of painting within this space. So for me, I am happy with the basic overall shape of the bird. We'll be using different additional shapes. I may change the head shape a little bit. It's okay to kind of make modifications along the way, but at least we have some basic shapes. Down here for the tail feathers, you can play with doing, if you wanted to do like individual tail feathers, you could. It's not necessary, but this at least gives us a point. I want you to be happy with the overall shape before we start painting. And we definitely want these lines on the side of our bird to match up because the bird, excuse me, the bird is one fluid shape, right? So kind of come in and make sure that all these lines kind of connect behind the branch. Okay. Excellent. So we are going to start painting because that's another really fun component of today's class. I have a feeling my head is going to change on my bird. I think it's going to get a little taller, a little bigger. That's okay. But I'm bracing myself that there's going to be a little bit of change, which is fine. We're going to use paint for all the other characteristics and the positioning of the face, etc. So let's go ahead and jump right in. So one of the techniques that we're doing different in this class that we haven't done before is less is more with regards to painting. So we are going to use some really gentle browns to start filling in this object and add in other objects. Okay, so this is going to be really fun. You can use whatever colors that you have on hand. I am going to make a brown by using, you can use red and green. You can mix blue, yellow, and red together to make brown. You can also mix blue and orange. So I have a burnt sienna and a light green. I'm going to mix these two colors together to make green. Oh, sorry, to make brown. And we'll jump right in here. I'm also going to need white to create some lighter tones. So what I do is I like to do a dollop of each and then mix them together kind of organically. And for the size of the brush that I'm using, I'm going to use a medium-sized brush. So this is a number 5 round tip brush. I'm going to be using this because it will give me enough control. And I'm going to take a little bit of my green, a little bit of this. I'm just going to make a little bit of a brown. Burnt sienna has a lot of brown properties. I'm adding a little bit of green just to kind of add a little bit of that blue tinge to it, because there's blue within green. You can see I have like a nice chocolate brown now. I don't want to use this dark of a color. A lot of the colors in this inspiration are much lighter. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get out my white and I'm going to create a lighter color of this. So I can put a small dollop of white on my plate. And we'll paint the branch first. I'm going for a lighter brown color. So what I'm doing is I have a little bit of paint on this brush. I'm just going to grab a little bit of the white and I'm going to make a lighter brown of choice. This branch may have a little bit of yellow in it. You can choose, but I have this color to start with and this is fine. It's a light brown. And I'm just going to paint this branch, the top part of this branch. And I'm going to try to stay within the lines. I am going to put a little bit of water on my brush to help smooth these colors, smooth the brush strokes. It also will give your branch a little bit of depth techniques along the way too, just by having lighter and darker shades. So it's kind of a nice way. We can always lighten this branch. We'll probably be adding some white to it to create some lighter areas, but it's good just to start with a base color of choice. This is fairly dark, but we can always lighten it up. Not a big deal. It's always good just starting somewhere. Don't overthink it. Just start as an artist. Very important. And I'm going to paint all sections of this branch. The bottom branch may be a little darker, so if you want to play with adding some light and dark spots within this branch, you're absolutely welcome to do that. I'm adding a little bit of this darker brown in the bottom side of this branch. So be playful here on how you fill this in. If you are a beginner artist, you can certainly just do one color here, but the more you paint, the more you are exposed to using different tones and shades of a given color, like brown, and bringing them into an object as you're painting them. So that means you could paint light brown, but you could also experiment with bringing in a little bit of darker brown, maybe on the underside of this branch, and see the depth that created. So these are the practices and the things that you'll learn in classes like this, where you can learn to bring objects to life in new ways, but also know how and when to incorporate these details. And it's different for everyone. And the nice thing is you can kind of go at your own speed. No one's going to tell you what to do or how to do it. You will naturally figure it out as an artist, which is incredible. Really fun. And again, this is, if you want this to be lighter, we can totally make this lighter. So let's just do a base coat first, and then we can manipulate it after. A lot of artists sometimes do base coats, and then they come back in and they do multiple layer details on top. So it's just really about being open to the process, because the process is going to change. It's not going to be the same all the time. So if you want it to be dynamic, one of the things you could do is I just put a little bit of white right here, and I'm making kind of a lighter brown. I may tuck in a little bit of a lighter brown on the top side of this branch in some areas. So this is a technique where you can play with integrating lighter colors along the way. And this is fun because you can play while the colors are still wet. You can play with blending colors, right? I'm playing with browns. You can play with blending and playing with different colors along the way. See how it looks so fun and different? So you can kind of pick and choose what you want to add and where. So these are all choices that you get to make. I may make the bottom of this branch a little darker. I may make the top side a little lighter. You can choose, but you can also just let it dry and come back to it too. But you want nice clean edges for your branch. So I like a little bit of the lightness, but I'm just going to let it sit for right now, and I can kind of come back to it. But while we have a little bit of this light brown going on, you can easily make this lighter brown, or even use this. I would suggest doing a lighter tone of brown. And we can put in some really beautiful, like a small bush down here on the bottom, but you're gonna need a tiny brush. So I'm just playing with the colors right here. You can find the right colors for you, but I want a really tiny brush. And we're gonna put in a little bit of a bush down here on the bottom. Okay. So for me, I may not be done with this branch, but I'm being patient. I'm letting it dry, and I'm going to come back to it. So transition with me if you're comfortable. But I'm going to grab a tiny brush that I have on hand. This is a number 2, but it has a nice fine point on it, and that's what I need for this next step. So I have like a nice brown. I'm going to start with this color. If I need to make it a little darker, I will. But we're going to have some twig-like branches coming up from down here. Now a little water may be helpful. So if I mix a little bit of water, maybe with this color, I'm taking a couple droplets of water from my water cup and I'm mixing this around. This will help it be a little more fluid for you. So the branch is starting at the bottom and it's kind of coming up. And I'm just gonna flick the top so it's nice and skinny. See that? And I'll probably do, let's see, maybe I'll have an overlapping twig here. And some of these branches will have like secondary branches on them. So you're just going to create a little bit of a cluster within this space. And ladies and gents, the water here is really helpful. Maybe they go off the left a little bit. But we're going to put little red berries on the ends of these, which is going to be really fun. So this bush will come all the way up just underneath this branch. It's not going to go any higher. So you can see I'm being deliberate with regards to how high I'm going right to the underside of this branch. And it's gonna, they're gonna like touch the bottom of the owl down here, but it's not gonna like touch this upper part of the owl. So as an example, it might end there, it might end there. And the water is incredibly helpful here. It's making it nice and easy and fluid. So play with the angles of your branches. These ones can go off the page if you want a little bit here. That's fine. But use your eye. We're just creating a little bit of nature down here in this corner. And this is nice and gentle and dainty. If you need to downsize to a smaller brush, feel free to do so. But do as many just so it fills the space. I'm going to end with a little bit of a smaller branch coming through here. Just to kind of end it for the eye. Maybe I'll add. So it just kind of closes off that space by just doing some smaller branches right within here. Just kind of contains it to that corner. And these are small and dainty. If you wanted them to be a little wider, and that's fine. You might be using a bigger brush than me. It's no problem at all. But we're just gonna let this dry. This is as simple as these are. We're not gonna do anything else to these branches. We're only gonna add in some red berries. So this is a little bit of nature that we're adding to our scene. So if you pull this back all the way, you can see the full composition. This is a little bit of nature happening. Okay, so get those branches in, let them dry, and we'll add red berries to those after. Okay. Terrific. Okay, since we have this watery brown, this is a great color to segue into our bird. So this light brown that we used for these branches is an excellent way to start feathering in the bird detail. So one of the most important things with this bird is this heart shape part on the face. So you can grab a pencil for this if you wish. But on the left side of the face, there is this brow per se. And you're creating the white part of the bird's face. It kind of has a little heart shape kind of where the forehead is. It's positioned more on the left of the head. See over here, looks like there's hair. This is where the fur is. This is where the feathers are going to be for the bird. So for me, I may like extend this side of the head for it to be a little bit bigger. Maybe not quite like that, but you can play with the shape of the head, right? But I want you to get this heart shape, the white part of the face in. This side line on the right is fairly rounded, and then it comes down. And see how the left edge of the face, it's only a single line here. There's no fur and feathers on the left because its face is looking to the left. Okay. And we'll add a little bit of like chin-like structure down here after with some shading. So don't worry about that too much. And we'll add some darker feathers to really highlight this side of the face. Okay. So don't worry too much there, but get that line in. Because we're going to do some outlining detail. And I'm going to outline what I just did at the top. And I'm not going to do a line on this side. It's going to be fairly light over there. So I'm not doing a brown line on the left side of the face. But this is where you can be thoughtful. Again, less is more in this class. If you need to take your eraser and erase some of your pencil here so you don't see it. I'm going to do a little bit of that. You can still see it in person. And you're going to use gentle single brush strokes to create feathers on the top of this bird's head with this brown. Now, if you paint something you don't like here, you can always paint over it, but these are small feather-like brush strokes. See, I'm leaving a little bit of a white gap, but give this bird some feathers. Give this owl some feathers. Leave white space. We want to see some white space here. Okay? You don't need to outline the head. Maybe the line around the face is a little darker. Just a little bit. Okay. If you wanted to come in and give your bird this kind of a rounded eye. And then a smaller, the eye on the left is actually really tiny. I'm using a brown eye right now. I can always make it darker. But the eye on the left is just really going to be a little bit of a dot, and we'll be using like some grays. So for the nose structure, oh, this is a little bit of a brown, but you can kind of get the gist. Then there's going to be a nose right in here. Like this is the bridge. You can kind of play with adding in some shading. There's a lot of shading with this bird. And you can see my head's a little funky shaped. It's okay. We're being playful here. This is where your white's really handy because you can easily use your white to paint over and like reshape your bird's head. So for me, this line I feel like shouldn't be there. So I could easily paint over something. This eye is too big, so I can put a little bit of white kind of on top of that eye. Can always come back to that. I can kind of cover up some of my pencil maybe with a little bit of white paint. But one of the things we'll play with as we start doing the face here is bringing in some lighter browns and grays. So the trick with this painting is that around the eyes, it's really white. The nose has depth, but around the eyes, see I'm leaving like a white donut kind of around. And then we're gonna put a little bit of a bird's nose, like a little, you can put a little triangle placeholder in here if you wish. But down here, you can figure out where you want, maybe a little diamond. You can play where you want the beak to be. And this side of the face, on the left side is all fairly white. So you're gonna have to play with the perspectives a little bit, but you can see where it's gonna start to come to life. I may put a little bit of yellow on my plate. I have a yellow ochre, which is really nice. I'm gonna put some of that on my plate. Maybe I'll do the bird's beak. So just be playful with where you put the beak. Maybe it's a little further down. You can play with the shape, right? You can see maybe it needs to be a little higher. You can always use white paint to cover up some of this stuff. No big deal. This is pretty white over here. I'm gonna keep this nice and bright. I'm adding a little bit of lightness over here actually, just to see what happens. So be playful with your owl's face over here. If you wanted to make a gray, you could. I'll show you what it's like to make a gray, adding a little shading. It's black and a little tiny touch of black and white. So if I have a little bit of black right here. So this is where you have patience. We don't always paint animals, so this is where we kind of just take a deep breath and we have some fun doing something a little different. But depth is an important thing for our animal's face today. So I'm mixing a little bit of a gray here, a light gray. And I added some of this brown here. That's okay. I'm going to come in with just a little bit of gray. And I may not be like sold with the side of my bird's head or not yet. I'm not worried about that. Maybe I just do a little tiny dot for the eye. You can figure out where you might want that left eye to be. You can see it'll come in place. It's just a little dab. And I can play with my nose a little bit more. My nose is not perfectly shaped, so you can figure out what you want that to be. Okay, that's a little bit better. Fairly white over here on the left side of the face. Okay, so you can see my face is coming along. This is still fairly light, even on the right side of the face. So it's okay to add some grays or browns and then just bring in a little bit of white on top just to soften it. So this is just a process. This is all a part of the process of art. It's doing a little here and then refining it along the way. So I'm just bringing in a little white on top of the other colors that I did to really just say, this is my owl. This is its face. And then you can kind of go back to the side of the head, but you could start adding in additional feathers as well. So as an example, if I really want to get the side of the head right, I can take a little bit of my browns here and just I like with a little bit of the water, it helps kind of break up the paint a little bit. The right side of the bird is a little lighter than the dark side of the bird. The left side of the bird is actually going to be darker on the body. So we'll do that in a minute. But if you wanted to start adding in some feathers, again, less is more. You want to hold some white space. So I'm starting just to really play with the shape of the body. This will allow me to get my bird's head right. It'll allow me to feel out the different colors and textures for the bird, but just have fun here. My face isn't done, it's okay. But just we're gonna play with adding different colored feathers and textures here. So this is a light brown. And you can add this all the way over to the edge, that's fine. If you need to erase any pencil, you can. You can always erase pencil at the end as well. And these feathers can come all the way down onto the tail. And you can see the overall shape of your bird will start to come to life. Even when you're done painting, you can get your pencil out and erase the pencil marks, or you can do a little bit of that now. But you can see how the bird it's a white bird, but it's gonna have some of these darker feathers on it, okay? So I'm gonna have you play with adding in 2 or 3 different colors of feathers. Now I have my burnt umber. There are some darker contrasting feathers too. So I am just going to be playful. I have water mixed with this paint. Water on your brush is really going to be helpful for you to get some nice feather-like texture in here. And you can keep your bird as light or as feathered as you wish, but I'm going in with a second color and I'm being playful on filling my bird with texture, feathered texture. And I'm using just the tip of the brush. And we are going to come in with some stronger contrasting colors in a little bit, but this is just a really great start. At this point in the class, you can also figure out where you might need to change the shape of your bird. So as an example, if my bird needs to be a little bit more full on this right shoulder, I can make the right shoulder a little bit bigger, but maybe this is the belly over here. Maybe this all needs to just be a little bit bigger. So you can play with, sit back in your chair and reflect on, am I happy with the shape of the bird? I can always come in and add some more white here to kind of like dim down some of my feathers. But just use your best judgment. You can add some feathers down here to the end. Again, I have a little water mixed in with my paint. You can pick and choose what you want these colors to be. I certainly may bring white and just to kind of re-brighten the bird. I can absolutely do that if I need to. You want to come right up under the branch. Try not to have any gaps near the branch from a feathered perspective. There we go. Okay. You can go back to your head if you want. My head is a little too round on this side right here, so I'm just gonna, I might make it a little more boxy. Maybe I use a little bit of white. So I made my head a little more boxy versus rounded, and you can see that helped a little bit. I could easily take a little bit of white and kind of cover that corner right there, right? So it's just all about evolution. The line outlining the face is pretty important. Maybe the face needs to be a little shorter. So you can play with, maybe my face needs to be a little shorter. See, I brought the chin up. I brought it up about 1/4 of an inch because my face was too long. So you can make some of those choices along the way. Maybe this side is still lighter, so I'm coming in, adding a little bit more white paint. You can really play with, you can add as much or as little structure as you wish here. I'm going to come in and add just a little bit more. There's still a lot of white on the head of the owl. I'm just going to add a little bit more texture. I'm adding just a little shading right under here just to kind of kick it off. And then this is another really fun part as you're playing with all these details. The left side of this bird is much darker, so you can take a darker brown and you can really add a little contrast. They're kind of darker feathers just that start just to come in just a little bit. And use a little bit of, and this is on the body only, use a little water to help make the brush strokes a little more smooth. I put water right on my plate again. There's even some really dark black kind of contrasting colors. I'm using just dark brown right now just to kind of get a sense of like how dark I want to go. But you can bring these contrasting colors all the way down to the tip of the left tail. And I'll get a little crazy here. I will put a little bit of black on my plate, a little bit more. And maybe I will mix a little bit of my brown with a little black and just see what happens. And I am going to put water in this little mixture right here, just to break it up. It doesn't need to be a thick paint pigment here. We're doing nice, soft, smooth brush strokes. But this is where I want you just to take a couple minutes to be playful with this owl. You could also use this darker color to outline the bird's eye. There's my bird's eye. I just used this darker blackish brown for that. Okay. But I can do just a few, and again, I need more water. The water really helps Makes it a little less intimidating. But I'm just gonna use my eye and just slowly pepper in a few of these darker feathers. On the left, and you can play with the shape of the bird. Maybe it comes out a little bit here. Does your bird look thin? Does it need to be a little more fluffy? Make the bird a little wider in areas if you need to. Those are all the fun considerations for this part of the class. And I'm gonna just slowly bring some of this black and brown down here to the tail. And there is some darker texture kind of throughout the bird too. So I'm just going to do a little bit of a dabble of this darker texture just to kind of make it all blend together. I'm going to do less on the right side. I'm going to keep the right side of the bird a little lighter. Okay. So do as much or as little as you wish here. You can always pause and go to a different area and kind of reflect and come back. It's always a very healthy thing to do. Do a little bit of feathering down here. Maybe we'll add some feet on the branch after. So you can see I've still kept my bird fairly light. I'm going to work on my bird's nose a little bit more. It needs to be a little bigger. So I'm using this ochre, yellow ochre. If you wanted to make your own color, you could do yellow and white and add a little bit of a gray tone. So bringing in a tiny touch of black will just dull it a little bit. You could try that. So for my nose, I'm going to use the smallest brush I have. Maybe it's smaller than a 2. You can make some of those choices. But my nose needs to be a little bit bigger. And it's a little, I don't know if it's a little rounded on top, but then it comes down to that beak. Okay. Maybe you make it a little bit bigger and then maybe you just paint over it with white if you need to reshape it, right? Anything kind of goes. You can see I did a bridge for the nose. That was really helpful for me because that bridge really allowed the face to it gave this face a little bit more structure. And if you need structure on the other side of the face, feel free to give it a little bit of structure. I use a little bit of like a light brown, a light gray, just to give that face some structure if you need it. But you can see a lot of around the eyes is very white, and then it has a little bit of gray, a little bit of brown around that. And the left eye is really tiny. I'm probably going to redo this 2 or 3 times until I get it right. So just have some patience as you play with this shape. Okay? And then fix and correct the bird's head shape as needed, just like the body. So for me, if I need to come in with a little bit of white to reshape the top or the side of the head, like feel free to do that. You're not going to hurt or harm anything. Okay? And I want you to be happy with how full your bird is, how wide it is. I feel like my bird could be a little more fluffy, a little bit more wide towards the shoulder area, but these are things that I want you to think about as you're reflecting on your owl shape. So as an example, I feel like here in the midsection, it could be a little fluffier. So over here, I'm just making it a little bit wider because for me, that's what I feel like it needs. So I want you to reflect on this commentary for what is this? How would you reflect this in the terms of your own painting? Do you feel like your body is some like more narrow in places? Do you feel like you need to add more here or there? These are all things you can consider. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give my bird a little eyeliner on the underside, maybe a little bit of eyeliner on the top side of the eye, just to add a little depth. Maybe I'll put a tiny white dot on the inside of the eye. Look at that. Those are all the little details that come to life with our owl. Maybe we do another little dot. Ooh, look at that. So a couple white dots on the inside of these eyes could bring your bird to life. So I did a little bit of a dark eyeliner, a gray eyeliner above and below the eye. So those are the little things. I'm still not happy with my nose. One of the things you can do for the nose is you could give it a little bit of depth, a little bit of a dark line on the top side of the nose. There's so many different things you can do. I'm going to give it a little bit of a dark line on the top side just to create a little depth. And I really just let my face evolve, and for me it's coming along. It's not incredibly perfect, but we're just gonna roll with it. I have a lot of gray on the bottom side. I'll probably bring the white down a little further on top of some of the gray. But overall, from the bird shape, I'm happy with the size of the head. I'm happy with the body. If you wanted to be cute, you could take some of your yellow ochre and give your bird some feet that are kind of hanging down or in the front. I would mix white with a little yellow ochre so it stands out, but you could do like little claws just kind of coming down like it's hanging on. It's very subtle, but there's some feet. You can make them a little more pointy if you wish. Owls have quite good grippers, don't they? So you could do that if you wanted to. It's good to let areas dry and come back to it. I'm happy with the overall, the base colors of my owl. You're all gonna work on your own things as you're making refinements. For me, I'm gonna make some of the face a little bit more whiter right here. It's a little too gray in spots, so I'm just making it a little bit whiter. Just in this space here. I really want the eye area to kind of just carry out and down a little bit more, because the owl's face is supposed to be fairly light in color. And I want you to be happy with the line, the stark contrasting line around the bird's face. This is a really important line, so I want you to make sure you get that right as well. Okay? So have a little patience, give yourself a little grace. We don't always paint owls, so this is a really fun way of doing something new together. And I may not be done my owl's face. So there's a couple things, like my eye maybe needs to be fixed. I don't know, we'll figure it out here. Maybe it needs to be a little more pointy. Maybe the point, you can kind of play with where on the eye it's pointy, where on the eye it's a little rounded. These are all the things you can play with. Okay. If you want to take a break and do something totally different, you can join me. We can put red berries on these branches. That's a really fun change. So we have our owl. I'm going to pivot. I could use my burnt sienna. I could use a red, whatever you have. You can pick and choose. I have like this nice red right here. I'm just going to use this. Using a small brush of choice, you can do tiny dots for berries. Let's see here. So I'm just going to mix this around. These are like red berries. I may not use this exact color. I may mix some of this with my sienna, my burnt sienna, so it's not so cherry red. Because I'm going for like a fall look here. So I'm mixing some of this red with my burnt sienna. So just to kind of tame it down a little bit. And then I'm just using a tiny brush. A little bit of paint management here, aka don't have too much paint on your brush when you're doing these berries. You could either use the round end of your brush to do berries, which are tiny little dots, or you could use the brush and the bristles. I'm going to alternate from the left to the right, and I'm just doing tiny little berry dots. So I'm going to pick a few branches to add some clusters. And just use your eye. You want them to be here and there. Pick an odd amount. You can do a couple of random ones halfway down the branch. But this is just going to make your nature scene just really come to life. It's quite pretty. You can do different sizes. These are your choices. You can make some bigger clusters. So you can put some on, like, you want some on like halfway on your branches too. And it doesn't even need to be on like the same branch or a branch nearby. Just use your eye and just put some here and there, just so they're balanced. So you can see I have some on the right over here. I'll just do a couple of clusters here. You still want to see the branch though, so you don't want to do too many. Let's do like a 1, 2, 3 over here. You can be as simple and subtle or as buried as you wish. So it's a nice complement to the picture today. And I think that's going to be it for me. But I can always add more. So it's good just to do a little bit, stop and reflect on reflect on your work. Okay. So I'm going to clean off my brush. These are fairly dark in color. It's like a dark cranberry in person, but that's perfect for me because I'm keeping this like a very subtle color inspiration today. We are going to add a few foliage leaves up here behind the bird. And we're adding some branches too. So we'll be adding some very light colored branches that are like the color of like some of the lighter feathers. We're adding some branches behind the owl next. So if you need to take a couple minutes to finish the berries, my owl is not done yet, but I've stopped just to kind of reflect on along the way. But my next step is going to be adding in some very soft, subtle branches in the background with a very, very light brown. So if you need to pause this video, feel free to pause the video. But I'm going to clean my brushes and prepare for the next step. So I'm aiming for the next step I'm going to do some cross branches coming in from the right, coming down. It's going to be on the top background part above the branch here in the background behind the bird. And I'm going for a light brown color. So I have a nice light brown right here. I need to make sure I have enough of this color. So if you need to mix this light brown color, do so. And I want you to have water mixed in. Very important that you have enough of the paint pigment. You don't need a lot, but you need water also mixed in. So it needs to be like a milky consistency, and you need to have enough of it to do a handful of branches rather. So I'm adding a little bit more water. You don't want too much water, otherwise it will kind of take away from the paint pigment. You want to actually see the paint. You don't want it just to be super watery. So I have a starting place here. I think I have enough. Might be a little watery, but I'm going to try. I do want it to be on the lighter side, so if I have to go in and do a second coat, that's fine. But the branches are going to start on the right. And I have this is a number 5 round tip brush. You can use any size you want. You're going to go behind the bird and off the left side of the page. So these are going to be a little thicker. So that's a little straight of a branch. I want it to have not so much straightness. These are also going to be a little thicker. You can always lighten these if I need to. It's not too bad. So try to make your branches not straight. Try to make them a little bit more natural in shape. It's going to get skinnier as you come over. Now this is like really straight. So I'm going to add some like funky secondary branches to this. Maybe I'll add a secondary branch. And if you need to practice doing like a little bit more of a natural shape, hold your brush a little further back. And that will help you. So you can see we're adding natural branches behind this bird. We're going to do more of this. I'm going to add a little bit of an angle here. I might do like a downward one over here just to add a little bit. Again, I'm trying not to do straight lines. But see how pretty this is? Nice subtle branches behind our owl. And you can make these as thick or as narrow as you wish. I'd focus on 3, maybe 4 branches back here, like primary branches. I need a little bit more of an angle. So I'm playing with the angles. And I'm also holding my brush way back here. See how that's helping me? It's allowing my wrist to be a little bit more fluid. And have fun just softly painting these in. See how this background detail is really adding in the nature. It's improving and enhancing our nature scene, which is really pretty. And our owl is really starting to stand out, which is exactly what it should be doing. I have another branch coming in here. I don't know where it's going to go. I'm just going to put it up there somewhere. So when you start a branch on the left, make sure you continue it through on the right. There we go. Go right behind your owl. And if you want to take these and do thinner lines kind of right off the page, feel free to do that. If they're just hanging out like in the middle of the space, you can continue them off if you wanted to, or you can have them stop. It doesn't matter. You can make some of those choices. Maybe you have another secondary branch coming up here. You can figure out what you want to put and where to balance the picture, right? The water helps. If you do not have enough water on your brush, add more water. It makes it so much easier. I'm just using the tip of the brush. Just gently fill in the scene. And I'm not going to add any more branches. I have a nice contrast. You can see how this detail work behind our owl really pushed our owl to the foreground, which is terrific. Absolutely beautiful. I'm just going to make sure all my branches are filled in. Again, nice and light allows our owl to stand out on top. If you need to make these branches lighter, feel free to go over them with a lighter color. Not a big deal. And then we're going to tuck in a few foliage leaves within this background tree as well. Well, I have this this paint here. I just thought if anybody wants to add a little bit of shading on the underside of the bird's claws on the branch, like giving it a little bit of, outlining the claws with a little bit of brown, it makes those claws stand out. Look at that. So I did a little bit of dark outlining on those claws, and now you can see the bird's claws on the branch. So I just thought of it. You want to do that, you can. All right. So I want you to be happy with the fill-in of these branches. I want you to have really nice clean edges on these branches. If you need, again, a little water on your brush, really helps move the paint around. Help you give you a nice smooth branch edge. If you wanted to play with different colors of browns for these branches, you can. I'm not going to do a ton of depth technique for these branches just because it's a subtle detail in the distance, but you can choose if you want to do more work on these, you can. I'm just looking for them to be well structured and filled in entirely. Sometimes I like to use the pinky of my dominant hand to stabilize my hand on the canvas. If you happen to paint on your owl, just touch the owl right up. Might add a little bit more yellow on my owl's nose. You can play with the shape again if you need to make any modifications. The shape of my owl's nose kind of looks like a guitar pick, if that's helpful. It's kind of rounded on top, pointed on the bottom. It has a little shading on the top too, so you can consider that. A little shading on the top of its nose, and maybe on the left. Just a little bit of darker shading. Top and around the left side. Just helps it give a little structure. And then we have one final part left of our class today. We're going to add a couple leaves in for a foliage look. So again, take as much time as you need to for the branches, the bird, the berries, the leaves. I'm going to be using yellow and orange and red primarily. I'm using my ochre for my yellow base color, so I have a little bit more ochre here. I'm also going to get some red on my palette. I have some of the mixed burnt umber and red. However, I'm going to grab a little bit of red too. Put a little bit of red on my plate. I'll show you what that looks like. So I have a little bit of red here, which is like a dark cherry red, and then I have a little bit of my burnt umber and red here, which is nice. So I'm going to add in an odd number of leaves here. I'm not doing a ton of leaves. These are accents to the bird. So I'm going to use a fairly small brush. This is a number 1. And I'm going to start with my lighter colored leaves first. Now, there's a lot of different shapes and styles of leaves, but I am just going to be playful with, and I'm outlining, I'm just putting in a leaf here. It does not have to be a perfectly shaped leaf. But I'm just going to start to fill it in. I wanted to put this leaf more behind the owl, but it didn't end up being that way. So I'm just going to fill this leaf in. I'm using my ochre. But what I can do is you can be playful along the way on how you fill these leaves in. So I could take a little bit of my water and ochre right here, and I could take a little bit of my red and make a little bit of an orange tinge. You see that? It's kind of cool. And I could take my watery orange and I could use that to help fill in this leaf. So I'm going to do some lighter leaves in this color. And I'm going to do some darker orange leaves, and I'll do some red leaves. And this leaf is just going to be floating a little bit, which is fine. Maybe if it looks funny, I can kind of tuck in a smaller leaf kind of over here. It's no big deal. I can kind of make this a little cluster if I need to, with a little bit of a red leaf, right? So you can be playful here about where you add colors and where you add leaves. So I have a little bit of a red. I'm using water to help fill in some of these shapes. Again, you can use your ochre. Play with blending a couple colors as you fill in these objects. It's really fun bringing in multiple colors to fill an object in sometimes. So I'm just going to tuck in a few leaves here and there. The leaves in the inspiration are a lot bigger. And the leaves don't need to be all the same shape. You can have some flat style leaves that are like a half a leaf shape. So like as an example, maybe I just have a little bit of an orange one or yellow kind of just coming in by the head. It's an accent of color that's complementing the scene. So it doesn't need to be like a full leaf shape. Like it doesn't need to be this. I could literally just tuck in a little bit of a longer leaf like that just to settle it in. And if you need to fill in around it, so I'm creating a little cluster here. That's fine. Absolutely fine. See how I have lots of different colors in this space? I like that personally. I am painting on top of the branches. You may need a second coat of paint. Ooh, you can bring in a darker leaf color. Maybe I'll tuck in a darker leaf color over here. Just to show you what a little contrast looks like. If you don't want to put in leaves, you don't have to, but it's a really nice touch. So just use your eye. Figure out where it makes sense. And you can see I'm using a little bit of a balance of color. I'm using some darks, I'm using some lights. So I'm using some oranges and yellows and reds over here. And I'm going to use some yellows and oranges and reds over here. I'm going to put in little clusters. They don't have to be like very specific, deliberate clusters, but I'm just doing an array of color in different spots. So up here, there may not be like a full leaf up here. Maybe it's a partial leaf. Doesn't matter. Right? See, there's just a few leaves and it's just adding a little bit of foliage to the picture. can just do like a little 1 and 2, and like there's a little bit of a tuck in of a leaf, and I'm using multiple colors to fill these in. Makes it look a little bit natural. So maybe it's really the end of fall in our scene, and there's very few leaves left on our tree. So we all know how that is if you live in New England or somewhere else that has true seasons. And you have a little bit of a smattering of leaves here and there. I might put just a little bit of a leaf here. Just like there's a little leaf hanging onto this branch. And maybe I just do a little leaf up here. They can be long and skinny with just a couple points. It doesn't have to be too crazy. All right. And again, I like the idea of having some of the golden colors as well as the other. So I am being really thoughtful of adding the golden colors and some of the reds. See that? I'm just tucking in little leaves. Because the owl is really the showstopper, so I don't want to take away too much from the owl, but you can make some choices about what you want to add and where. But I love just putting a couple of these leaves that are just hanging on ever so slightly to the end of the season. And if you don't like that technique that I'm doing, you do not have to do it, but I'm just really being outside the box on placement today, just for consideration. And I'm going to put a couple golden leaves just to kind of complement the darks and the lights. So I might put a little bit of a golden leaf just right here. And I'm just using the tip of the brush. And I think I'm pretty close. You don't need to add a lot of leaves, okay? I am inspired to make my berries a little bit more red. So these are very dark in color. I may take a little bit of red and just do a little bit of a red accent detail on top of some of these berries just to make them pop a little bit in color. So it's kind of a two-toned effect for these berries, which is kind of fun. So I'm just doing a secondary dot or detail of red on top of this dark cranberry that I used. For me, that just brings me joy. In art, you always do what you want to do. You may be inspired to do the same. You may already be happy with the color of your berries. All is well. These are the choices that we have as artists to continue to work on something, or if you feel like you're going to get to a point where you're happy. That's the name of the game, and it's just about being present and trying new things. Okay. And if you wanted to spend more time on today's picture, you could. You can decide. The only other remaining things I would ask you to consider is, does your owl have enough white on its face? It's a really important thing. I could probably go in with another coat of white and brighten my owl in places. You happy with the coat of feathers? You could certainly play with the dynamic leaf colors of your golden leaves and adding secondary colors to these leaves to make them pop. You could keep them as flat in color or as detailed as you wish. So those are all areas where you could spend a lot more time if you wish. But most importantly, I hope that you enjoyed today's class. If you are a part of our Patreon community, I would love for you to share your artwork with us on Patreon. That's where we have lots of videos and tutorials available. But I want to thank you so much for being here. I hope you enjoyed the experience, and I would love to see your artwork, so be sure to share it with me after class. All right, have a great day, and thanks again.